if you really have an understanding of the way that difficult things in life can bring about positive change, and maybe that's something for people. It's like, hey, maybe in a coaching session, it's like, let's reflect on something, a time where you dealt with a difficult experience and it turned into something beautiful that maybe you didn't see right away. If everything goes haywire and goes down the drain, like, I'm alive, I'm here, I can experience life, I can do things that I want, I have control over where I put my energy. I think that the foundational philosophical grounding in that makes all the stuff that's going on externally and the little things that we run into, seem like opportunities versus, consequences of what's going on in our lives.
Happy birthday to you. What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the No Half Cakes podcast. I am your host, Jim Sabellico, and I am super happy that you are here with me, especially on today's episode, because it is going to be a fun one. If you're new here, just a quick rundown. These episodes are typically my favorite ones. These episodes, which come out every Wednesday, are a long-form version of the show where I will sit down with someone who's done some life. We will talk open, honest, real, raw. We'll talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that we have learned along the way. And again, like I said, these are some of my favorite episodes because the realness and the rawness of having these unscripted conversations usually leads to a great spot. And I know that I personally take a lot out of these conversations, and the feedback that I get, a lot of people do as well. So I'm hoping that you will do the same, especially with today's guest, who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. One other bit of housekeeping, just so you are aware. Saturdays is a strategy sprinkle version of the show. It's a short form version. Typically around 10-15 minutes. It is meant to be a tactical, practical tip to help you level up in your personal or professional life. And Mondays, I do a Mindset Monday, meant to start the week strong with a powerful, positive mindset. So if you're looking to get the week started off right, that's where I would start. But again, today, we have a special guest, Mr. CJ Ledy, with us. And CJ, man, I'm pumped to have you here. We have a lot of alignment, and I know that we will have a lot to talk about. So without further ado, man, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. And I just trimmed up the mullet and I shaped the mustache just for this call. I don't always look this goofy, but I got a party coming up next weekend, so I figured I'd do something a little more fun this year.
I love it. It's I wish I could pull it off, to be honest with you. That's good. So I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of your background and how you got to be where you are. Just if you could sort of introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a business mindset coach. It's one of the hats that I wear, and I work with entrepreneurs, executives, salespeople, and really help them to build more clarity within what they do in order to really, refine why it's important so that they can not only build more fulfillment in the things that they do, but also become more effective. So, it's that's kind of the specific niche, but it takes a lot of different forms based on who I'm working with. I think a lot of the work that I end up doing, typically becomes, obviously we work in the business space is kind of the focus, but a lot of, your life is what affects how you do your work. So it's really about slowing down and taking inventory of, what are, maybe some of the fears or what are some of the limitations that are slowing down your progress or your enjoyment within whatever it is that you're doing. So that's the kind of the main hat that I wear.
I love that a lot. And one of the things I often think and try and bring through is that better people build better businesses. And I think a lot of the frustrations business owners see, they fail to realize that the responsibility is with them. And once they become the best version of themselves, right, and they go through the work, the business sort of grows on its own. And I think a lot of people want to take that shortcut and skip the uncomfortable stuff and just plug in some things and have their business be amazing and skip the part where they have to work on themselves. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and if you think it's really that people focused first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've listened to some of your work before and kind of heard your conversation about, you can find success in the work that you do, but, and actually I believe it was a Jim Carrey quote that he says, I hope that everybody finds all of their, is able to live all of their dreams and find all of their success, to realize that, some of the goals and things that you're chasing that you think are so important actually are not. And that was a paraphrase. But the life that you're living is really the backbone of what you're doing within your businesses. And I think that it's easy, especially in the Western culture, to be very caught up in the idea of status and achievement and success at the cost of your own personal fulfillment and personal health as well. And I think too, when you really look at the long-term success of people who find both achievement and fulfillment, it's a balancing act of the two. And that, I don't think that, people can run really hard and really fast for, 5, maybe 10 years and sort of neglect everything else. But there's not longevity in that in somebody's career. You really have to build a solid foundation of your life. Otherwise, it starts to come apart at the seams. And some of the work that I've done with, especially, executives and certainly entrepreneurs who are, sort of workaholics to a degree and kind of neglect important areas of their lives, it starts to really wear at their ability to be super productive and to show up on a consistent basis. And that's where you start to see some of that burnout as well. So I couldn't agree more. I think, great people build great businesses, or whatever phrase you use more eloquently, but couldn't agree more.
Yeah. When you talk about running at full speed for 5 or 10 years, it makes me think a lot about the quote that the man who loves running will far outseed or far outpace, or whatever the term is. I'm messing it up. But the point is, the man who loves running will always go further than the man who loves the destination. And, I think there's a lot of alignment there in terms of like looking to figure out, how do you build this big business, right? You can try and hustle and grind your way to it. But if you find something that you are truly aligned with in your purpose, man, the success is going to come to you rather than you trying to run really hard for 5-10 years and hustle and grind your way to it.
Yeah, I love that you said that too. One of the interesting questions I get all the time, I say, yeah, I'm a mindset coach, and people say, oh, I've got my work figured out. I've got a few areas, but they always say, I just can't seem to stay consistent with exercise. Not everybody, but this is a common question. One of the most common questions that I get, and people ask, how do I stay committed over the long run? And I became really fascinated with this question, started doing a lot of my own homework. And what I found was a really interesting study. They brought together 66 different studies that were independently done about long-term exercise. And they figured out what are the common threads across all of them. And I can send you the link to the article. But what they really found at the core was that the people who worked out, not just for a couple years consistently, not just for 5 years, but who really were exercise proficient for 10, 20, 30, 40 years for their entire lives, it was people who loved to work out. They loved the actual process. They were like, yeah, working out is one of the best parts of my day. And it's not so much about what we typically see of like, oh, you got to have this goal that's, really important to you, and you have to be, in constant pursuit of that. It's really less about that. It's more about enjoying the day to day. And I think that applies to mostly every avenue of our lives, especially business. It's, can you actually slow down and be like, you know what? I love logging on. I love the work that I do. And to really reframe it in your mind, to not be like, oh, I got to put these hours in. It's a means to an end. If you have that mentality, it's very difficult to sustain the effort that's required to really, reach a super fulfilling and achievement-filled profession, life, health, all those types of pieces.
I do agree with you on that. And it brings up an interesting point, because I feel like there's a lot of contention around this. As people are just starting out, and I was the same way, there's like this built-in desire to set the goalpost as make the $1 million or get the Lamborghini or attach it to a physical thing, right? We talk about the difference between reaching that goal, that destination, versus enjoying the process. And it's a really tricky topic, because I think as you are young in the process, right before you really figure out what is your purpose and get that alignment, those goals, the Lamborghini, the $1 million check, like, I think that those have a very definite use, right, as you are starting out in that. But I think there's not enough conversation about how to and where to make the shift from the thing to the process. So I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that. And that's definitely kind of the next layer. So, a decent amount of the work that I've done, especially recently, has been around reward systems. And I do talk about it a little bit in my book. So, my book is Tune Your Mind, Finding Follow Through and Fulfillment in the Dawn of Distraction and Disruption. And one of the specific chapters is around building necessity. And I talk about how reward systems are a great way to do that. And so, what we just discussed is sort of the internal reward system of appreciating the actual process, right? Then you have the external reward systems, which is the goal setting, which is having that lofty idea of where you're trying to go, being able to measure your progress, all those kinds of things. So, really what the research shows is that the goals can be very helpful in the beginning to help somebody get started and have them set a benchmark and to become clear about what's their sense of direction, right? And so that's like your motivational boost to get you started. Or sometimes if you hit a little bit of a lag, maybe you got to pull up that Lamborghini picture again and be like, oh yeah, let's go, let's chase that thing down, the inspiration. But when you really talk about discipline and long-term follow through, that's where that internal piece is super important, that you genuinely enjoy what you do. And so really, I break it down into 4 different reward systems. You have your internal long-term destination. So you set an idea of what sort of personal growth you want to experience through this. How do you want to grow as a person through whatever process you're doing within your work, your health, or whatever this long-term goal is. And you also assign a long-term destination, external, extrinsic reward. So something like the Lamborghini, you say, you know what, if I can build my business to 10 million bucks a year, I'm going to buy myself the purple Lamborghini that I've always wanted, whatever it is. Set an external goal and also an internal fulfillment, personal growth element. And then, so those are the long-term destinations. And then the 2 internal progress related ones are, how do you want to feel as you're going? What kind of state of mind do you want to show up with? What is the energy you want to have when you sit down to work? You want to be passionate? Do you want to be excited? Do you want to be relaxed? Do you want to be bold? What energy do you want to bring on a consistent basis? The more you can really be aware of that and refine and define it, the more you can actually start to show up with that. The more your subconscious actually knows, okay, this is what we do. This is how we show up on a consistent basis. And then also, so that's the internal progress, process oriented. And then you've got the external process oriented too. So that's about saying, okay, let's set a couple, 4 to 6 week goals. And let's say, if I hit my call metrics or my outbound emails or, whatever, outcome related goals you have, and you say, I'm going to go out to a fancy dinner, or I'm going to make a donation of a couple $100 to the charity of XYZ. You sort of set little benchmarks, little nuggets along the way that can inspire you from an external position. So in my book, I kind of break down to, much greater length, but those are sort of the 4 reward systems that I've kind of worked to develop based on the research that I've done of obviously the importance of the internal. And I think that's more of the long-term discipline you'll experience if you're really internally plugged in, and the external. And that's kind of the inspiration and the motivation that sometimes gives you a little kick in the butt. And if you have too much of either one, it's, I would say it's better to have the internal. Like you said, if you really just love it and enjoy it, you're going to show up whether you get the Lamborghini at the end or not. So I think that one's a little bit more sustainable, but certainly finding a sense of motivation, inspiration is crucial to any worthwhile, journey.
I love that so much. And I will be honest with you, I got to grab that book because I'd love to read that a little bit more in depth. When you talk about the energy part, I find that so intriguing because I really feel like, we talked about a little bit before, the way that you show up and the man who loves running, right? The more that you are aligned with your purpose, the better you're going to show up, the better the results will be. And I think that that's so true of any high achiever that I know. The people who accomplish the most are often just operating within their gift, right? They've figured out what their gifting is and they are just using that and sharing it with as many people as possible, not hustling and grinding, right? But just operating from that gift. And I think those are the people that really experience that highest level of growth and achievement and success. So yeah, I think that's sort of the ultimate goal. But like you said, having those internal and external goals as well is so tremendously important for that process. I know, at least for me, when I had the goal of the house, the car, the bank account, there were plenty of times where it's 2:00 in the morning and I'd look at that picture and be like, all right, dude, keep going. You gotta do this for that reason. And for me, I know when I got there, and realized, all right, cool, it's just a thing. Now what? Is sort of when I shifted from that external to the internal. And the question I kind of have there is, a big part of me doing this podcast is to have these conversations and help people prevent the hurt and the pain that I went through, sort of realizing that and realizing what I missed out on and the loss that I had from skipping all the things and from missing my kid's birthday because I was chasing a dollar amount. But I always wonder if it's something that can be avoided, right? So can you and I sit here and have this conversation and prevent someone from having to go through that? Or do they need to reach their goal? Do they need to get the Lamborghini, the bank account, the car, the house, whatever it is, to then realize it wasn't that the whole time, it was something bigger?
Great question. And I think that the answer is going to be different for every listener here. But I do 100% believe that somebody who has that idea in their mind and can become more aware of the idea that, hey, maybe just getting that goal, maybe that outcome, that external reward of the car, the house, maybe that isn't all that there is. Maybe there's something deeper going on. I think anybody who can start to process that before they reach that destination is much more likely to see the signs of like, hey, I need to slow down a little bit and pay attention to my kids. Is what I'm going for there important enough to sacrifice what's going on right here? And, just to back it up really quick, because I think it relates specifically to this, I was really blessed at 18 years old. So it was about 15 years ago, I was hypnotized. And I grew up as somebody with a ton of social anxiety. I'd get super nervous around meeting new people, really anything in general. And this hypnotist, it was one of those stage hypnotist guys where it makes people dance like a chicken on the stage and stuff. And afterwards, he said, hey, anybody in the crowd that wants to be hypnotized, I'm going to do that. And it was like 400 people there. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'd never done any meditation or anything like that before. And talks me into this deep, deep trance. I end up with my head literally in my lap. And he goes, okay, you can focus on one of three things: lose weight, stop smoking, or stop the fear of what others think of you. I was skinny, not interested in cigarettes. So, I defaulted to not caring so much about what people thought of me. And when I came out of this, it was the most freeing experience of my life. I felt so much more comfortable in my own skin. I felt so much more natural. I felt so much more confident. It was so much easier for me to engage with people at a level of depth. And I was so fortunate to have that because of the lesson it showed me right there, which was I went from very focused on the future and my goals and all of those types of things to being very present in the moment and appreciative of the people that were around me and the moments that I had to connect with somebody important. And that really just opened up a whole different lens of success is important, but actually the experience of your life is what really matters. And that's what people are after with the success. It's this achievement that you think is going to make you feel a certain way. But when you slow down and you realize, actually, I have access to all of those feelings inside of myself at any given time. It's can I tune in with them? Can I embrace my environment in a way that makes me feel that way already? And once I recognized that, it just helped me to appreciate the fulfillment side so much more than the achievement side. And I think that that's led to a lot of the successes that I've had, is that I do it for the right reason. I certainly believe it's I do it because I love it. I do it because it's a part of, I've tried to look at life in a way of what excites me. What are the things that I'd love to go out and do just for fun, just for the bucket list stuff of, getting my pilot's license and living in multiple different states and living in an RV, traveling across the world, and investing in RV parks and stuff. It's always been things that genuinely are of interest. And living in the investment real estate world, which is really my space, I talk to guys all the time, what drives your investment interests? And a lot of them, they're like, it's returns. It's returns, 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 returns. I don't care if it's, saving the world and some incredible thing, or if it's some slumlord situation. I just want the best return possible. And kudos to that. That's totally, everybody has their own way of approaching, business and life in general. But for me, it's always been I only want to invest in things that I am genuinely excited about and that I think add value to the world. And I think that mentality has helped me to really be excited about the work that I do in a totally different way, and has helped me to really breathe life into areas that maybe I wouldn't have pursued as fully or had the confidence and the courage to go after. So long story of the importance, I think, of really being able to just slow down, reflect, see what's meaningful and true to you, and to move forward with that. And I think people who hear that message and connect with it, I think it can, absolutely trigger a change and a different approach to how we, go after the things that are important to us.
Yeah, I love that story so much, and it's amazing that you shared that, because my next question to you was going to be kind of talking about early CJ and what it looked like for you growing up, and was there some pivotal moment that shifted you toward, doing this, where you are a mindset coach, where you are working with people? Because I know, at least for me, usually comes from some experience that you experience, that transformative shift that you then need to share with other people. So for you, was that hypnosis event?
That was the triggering moment that made me go, holy, the mind is so impactful on everything that we do. And it made it, unavoidable at that point. It was like, I just realized in an instant that the inner workings of my mind were controlling my enjoyment and my effectiveness on a moment to moment basis. My life went from this scared, uncomfortable to this just free and confident and natural, just real. And life was two different, before it was black and white, and now we're in full color. And so in that moment, it was like, whoa, if this just happened for me in a little 40-minute session, what, and funny part of that story, the trance, I went so deep into this trance, it felt like it went by in a matter of minutes. And when we came out of it, the hypnotist said to the crowd, okay, how long do you guys think that lasted? And we're in a crowd of 400 people. Like I said, I had a lot of social anxiety. Very first person to scream at the top of my lungs, 5 minutes. I would never scream out in front of a crowd of people. It just flew right out of my mouth. And I was kind of like, whoa. And everybody started looking at me. And usually I would be like, get all flustered and like, oh my God, 400 people are staring at me right now. I felt nothing. I was just like completely comfortable, completely calm. And, I left there, and it just, so many little things happened along the way. There is another very pivotal part that has kind of accelerated this interest for me. And that was about a year and a half after my hypnosis experience. Unfortunately, I had a handful of friends pass away in really kind of tragic and unexpected ways. And I was a part of a big friend group at the time. And, I was already so fascinated with the mind and how it affects everything that we do. And I think I got a crash course in the way that people show up mentally to particularly grief here, but it applies to everything that we do in life, and how something can happen and we can all react differently based on whatever programming we have in our mind, how we choose to react to the things that happen. And it can significantly affect how we process what just went on, how it affects us moving forward. So for my friends who sort of had the monkey mind, like I like to call it, it's the Buddhist term for getting very, stuck in, it's like a monkey swinging through the branches of your mind, just flying through distracted and uncomfortable thoughts. The people who really just followed those, oh, this is the worst thing, this is terrible, all that ideology. One of them actually ended up overdosing. And actually, about 2 weeks ago, I just got news that one of my other friends who was in this group lost his life to a mental health battle. And so, we had that side of our friend group that I watched that really went down a really dark, nasty path. And then there were others who were looking at it as like, hey, wow, this is a learning opportunity for all of us. Of course, like, we never want what happened to have happened, but now that it's happened, what do we do with this? How do we go out and live our lives in a way that's reflective of how our friends would have wished that we carried on their legacy? What are the memories that we can bring with us and continue to bring up? What are the parts of their character that we want to emulate? What it was a big driving force for me writing the book. I had another group of friends who really found inspiration, found ways to find reason and find meaning through all of it. And they've gone on to do incredible things. And so it's just really interesting to see, like, the way that you interpret what's happening in your environment can lead to drastically different outcomes. And this is true in our health. This is true in our work. There's always little disruptions, as I like to call them, that shift what's happening in your life. And it can be a catapult in a positive direction or a negative. And it all comes back to your mindset and how you process the things that are going on and how you decide to take it. So catapulted from my hypnosis experience, the next thing was the loss of my friends that really made me go, wow, I need to take this seriously. And then it wasn't just about me. It was like, how do I show up for my friends? How do I show up for the families who lost their children, And so that really took my coaching. It was unprofessional at that point. I was just doing it out of the love in my heart and wanting to connect with people and an interest in how are you processing what's happening? How, is there anything that I'm learning that I can share with you through this? And, that was sort of the unofficial start to a lot of my coaching. So those are two of the biggest experiences that have kind of rocketed me into an interest in mental health, wellness, mindset coaching, writing the book, podcasting, all that.
Yeah, those are definitely powerful stories. So thank you for sharing that with me. It's a lot to unpack. And man, first of all, my condolences for lost your friends, especially for struggling with mental health it's no joke. And, the immediate question it presents to me is, like, what is the difference between those two people? The person who falls deeper into like that mental anguish and the despair versus the person who uses it as a motivating force to enjoy life and to appreciate what they have. I don't know that there's a particular like black and white difference between the two, right? I think a lot of it comes down to the programming and like the perspectives that they have. But the struggle that I see is like there's this innate nature for someone who's already done the work to be like, grab him by the shoulders and shake him and be like, bro, wake up. You're looking at this the total wrong way, and you wish that you can give them that like instant perspective shift. But there are a lot of people who are even listening to this right now who maybe they're not dealing with something as dark, but they're stuck in whatever mindset they're in where they just can't see the positive. They're stuck in that frustration. They're stuck in this mental pain that they can't fully enjoy life. So I'm trying to figure out what is, from your perspective, the best way to approach someone like that and help give them, that leg up, help give them the shoulder to lean on, help give them that next step to, maybe you can't give them the hypnosis moment where they can get that instant perspective, but how do you give them the olive branch to help, bring them back out of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think it's really going to be different for everybody based on their specific upbringing and like, the points that you mentioned, your programming. Everybody's wired a little bit differently, so they're going to therefore respond a little bit differently. And especially in a lot of my coaching, I like to spend a lot of time in the beginning really uncovering who somebody is and what makes them tick and what inspires them and what drives them, because we all have these different frames that then support how we deal with difficult times and positive times, and therefore what's effective for us in those. So unfortunately, there's not really one silver bullet, especially in a difficult time in life. But what I will say is, I think that anybody who has a deep framed understanding of the idea that we have power over the way that we think and the way that we feel, and that any circumstance can be used and can be seen in a positive light. I believe if you genuinely understand that and you genuinely believe it, then you are always in a position where you can go, hold on, let's, of course you get overcome with emotion in difficult times, and that's normal and healthy, and there's good ways to grieve about things. But as long as deep down you know that I can control my own ship, which is my life, which is my body, which is my mind, if you truly believe that, then it gives you a sense of power in anything that goes on. And if you really have an understanding of the way that difficult things in life can bring about positive change, and maybe that's something for people. It's like, hey, maybe in a coaching session, it's like, let's reflect on something, a time where you dealt with a difficult experience and it turned into something beautiful that maybe you didn't see right away, and opening up the idea of like, actually, yeah, what I can see, maybe I don't see it right now. I can't see the silver lining yet, but it's the framing of like, I do believe that I have power in the way that I think and the way that I feel. And I do believe that, you know, the grander philosophical perspective of life, which is we're just here to experience this ride. We're out here on a rock spinning through space, and we're blessed to be alive in this moment amongst, billions of years behind us and billions of years to come. We're here in this very moment. Like, it's a blessing to be alive. It's a blessing to be able to communicate and to do things and to be a part of the whole experience. I think when you have that deep philosophical understanding of like, hey, even if everything goes haywire and goes down the drain, like, I'm alive, I'm here, I can experience life, I can do things that I want, I have control over where I put my energy. I think that the foundational philosophical grounding in that makes all the stuff that's going on externally and the little things that we run into, seem like opportunities versus, consequences of what's going on in our lives.
Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe what you just said makes 100% sense. I appreciate and agree to all that. My sort of second thought to that is someone who is stuck still and who is just so deeply rooted in that negative mindset that they can't really break out free from it and see the possibility. I'm curious for like your thoughts and perspective on having community around that person to love and support them for who they are, where they are, and to make space for them to feel those feelings and be exactly who they are, not force them to change yet, right? But just to hold space for them to feel their emotions, to feel it out, to just be in the struggle, but stand next to them in it. Because to me, I think one of the most important things about our position is to hold space for people, to give them an opportunity and a space to figure it out, right? Because like you said before, it's going to be different for everybody. And unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. But if we can hold space for people and have that conversation to let them feel seen and heard, I think it, at least to me, gives them an option and a way out other than, going further down the hole.
Absolutely. Yeah, and actually, I'm speaking at a suicide awareness music festival event in September here in Minnesota, and I've been working with the facilitator who's putting on the program and who asked me to come speak. And he had some really interesting comments about how, originally they started, it's called the Living Foundation, and they started it years ago. And the focus was on, let's get the conversation going. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about suicide. Let's talk about these things. It's like so closed door and so hush hush and, or not cliche, but maybe there's stereotypes around it and whatever else. People don't feel comfortable. But he's like, you know what? In the last several years, there's been so much more of what we're doing, so much more open conversation, and people are talking about it now. So he's like, so now what do we do? What are the tools that we can use now that we're having the conversation? Let's start to actually put some tools in place. And one of the really great pieces that he said is, sometimes it's less about approaching the person that's going through the struggle, and it's about talking to their network. Because, when you work with people who are really depressed and in difficult spots, oftentimes they're not super open to, oh, go out and try this. Oh, why don't you just go out and take a walk? Why don't you start exercising, eating healthy, all these things. And it can be a real struggle. But like you said, there's people around them that can hold space and that can be, a light for them that helps pull them out of that darkness. And so what he was really saying is like, it's important to reach out for tools for the support systems. And even just going through the loss of my friend a couple weeks ago, one of the things that it instantly made me think is, wow, because I hadn't talked to him in several years. And it made me just go, wow, there's lots of people in my life that I haven't talked to in a long time, and people who I know went through difficult times back in, years prior when we lost our friends and things. And it's like, so I've made it my mission to reach out to 10 friends that I've just sort of lost touch with. And, even if it's just a text message of like, hey, what's up, man? How's life been? What are you up to? Something simple just to show that you care, show that somebody knows that you're out there and that you're doing things. And, so I think that that's a big piece, is just being able to show up and reach out to those people that you haven't reached out to in a while, because you just never know what they're going through. And like you said, hold space for people. If you're close to somebody like that, just be present. You don't have to offer them the silver bullet of like, hey, I was listening to this podcast and they said, if you just do this, 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 and that, sometimes people don't want to hear that. They just want to be able to sit down and say, just tell me what's going on, man. I'm just here to listen. Like, I'll give you a hug. I'll cry with you if that's where we go, and we'll just sit with that. It doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm going to fix this thing for you. I'm just here to support you. And I think that's a huge resource that you can be for people who need it.
I agree. I think it reminds me a lot of a saying that I use with a couple of my buddies, is that instead of trying to be the tugboat in the harbor, trying to be there, trying to just manhandle and force an issue to change, like our responsibility should instead be to be the lighthouse on the shore, like shining the light and just be an example of possibility. And I think for us to be able to stand in our authentic selves and to be that definition of what's possible for somebody else, right? Because a lot of people, they look around especially at the definition of a man, right? And two dudes talking about this, I think it's a good conversation to have. Like, I'm looking at you on the other side of this with an impeccable mullet and a gorgeous mustache. I'm like, this is a man right here, but a man who's in touch with emotions, who's not afraid to talk about being vulnerable, to talk about feelings. And I think there's too much of in society that the definition of a man has to be this overtly masculine figure who's got zero emotions, who's just bulging with muscles, who never cries, who never feels feelings, who just works continuously and provides financially, and that's it. It's just this emotionless cold machine. And I think that there's not enough people who are willing to stand up and be that lighthouse to say, hey, this is another definition of what's possible. Like, I'm not going to force you to sit here and have this conversation. I'm not going to shoot the silver bullets at you, but I'll just stand here and say, hey, look, this is me. This is who I am. This is the struggles I went through. Here's where I'm at. This worked for me. It might not work for you. It might. But if you need someone to talk to about it, or if you need another definition of what's possible, I'll share my story. And I see you out here doing the same thing. So, I say all that to say I want to honor you for doing that, because I think it's really important. I know there are a lot of people who will benefit from that and who have benefit already. So A, thank you. And B, I just kind of love to hear your take on men in society and that whole line of question.
Yeah, I love that, and I appreciate it, and I see that in you too. And I think that guys showing up and being open, honest, vulnerable, emotional, I think it's a wave that's been happening. Certainly, like a lot of my friends and a lot of the people that I network with, I feel like it's become more and more expected. And even certainly, women that I've dated and my current girlfriend, it's always appreciated if you can be both, a strong, confident, stereotypical man, but you also have depth, you have emotion, you have honesty and vulnerability, and you're willing to show the uglier sides of yourself. There's serious beauty in that. And I think that a lot of people are afraid of it because, like you said, it's sort of been built up in our culture of like, oh, men never cry, men never, they're just tough guys who go out and get things done, pull themselves up by their bootstraps and never go through the difficult this, that, and the other thing. But that's not real. And everybody knows that that's not real. And men are just as emotional as women, and in our own different forms. And every person has their own different forms of emotion. It's not just men and just women, So I think that as a entire world, just as people in general, I think the more we just become open, honest, natural reflections of ourselves, and that's really what I learned in my hypnosis. It wasn't about like, okay, now I'm this like macho, confident guy who's like, yeah, every time, puff up your chest and all this. If anything, one of the interesting things, I've never even talked about this, but that I noticed was I started to relax my shoulders way more after it, because before I was kind of like, walking around like that. But then I was like, why am I doing that? Like, doesn't feel comfortable. It's not natural. And I just realized that I was walking and just everything that I was doing was more relaxed. And it was like, it maybe wasn't the most macho, but it turned into something else. The confidence that I found in being honest, open, and natural was way more masculine than what I was doing before. And I think that's the truth of it. And I think that's where people can really connect to it, is you being your most masculine, strong man is actually tapping into all that you are, being connected with that, being willing to look at yourself in the depths of your mind, being willing to go out and try things that scare you, being willing to be vulnerable and have a close conversation with somebody and cry, tell them that you love them in a meaningful way. Like, that is the depth of not just being a man, but being a person, being a human being that's real. And I think that's where like this real concept comes up of like, are you truly giving what you feel? And that's a scary thing to do. That's a scary thing to show up as. And I think that the more you tap into that, though, the more you feel alive and the more fulfillment you experience and the more you gain from the conversations and the interactions that you have, and the more you can appreciate music and food and all the things that you do when you're just true and you're not shielding it with all of these personas and these walls that you carry around to protect yourself. And you're just like, nope, knock that down. I might get hurt because I don't have that wall here anymore, but I open myself up to actually feel. Maybe there's something beautiful there that's going to be, and if it's not, and if it's something tough, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to experience the emotions. I'm going to learn from it. It's going to be a growth opportunity. I think that's a big piece, is just stripping down the walls and realizing that there is actually deep masculinity in your ability to be vulnerable and to be the most natural, real, honest reflection of yourself, which maybe hasn't seemed that way in the past. But I think more and more, when it's done right and done well and done honestly, it's hard to deny.
Yeah, I strongly agree. And I think that that's like this positive cycle that when you do that, you experience more freedom and you are more true to your authentic self. And the more true you are to your authentic self, the easier it is to go into situations where you're not afraid of judgment or criticism because you know who you are. And the more you walk through those things and you let people judge you, let people criticize you, because it doesn't sink in anymore, because you understand who you are and you realize that like 99% of the time, that's just a reflection of where they are at in their life. There's nothing to do with you. It's just, you understand that it's a struggle they're going through and you are just the closest thing for them to put that on, to get it off of themselves. So you give them grace and then you just keep it moving. And, I love when you were talking about that and the way that you can show up as this pure version of yourself, because it reminds me of this definition I got of what it means to be a warrior, right? And we think about a warrior as someone who goes out and fights war. But when you really break it down, a warrior is someone who brings peace. A warrior is someone who goes out and does the things that are necessary. They will go fight the war, but the war is not the purpose. Peace is the purpose, right? So as we kind of redefine what it means to be masculine, what it means to be a warrior, because I think most men want to identify as this macho masculine warrior, they look for fights. But once they realize that the purpose is not proving your worth as a man by fighting or puffing out your chest, but by your ability to bring peace, your ability to endure what needs to be endured, right? And grow through it and be that version that needs to be when you need to tap into it. But the destination should be peace, should be joy, should be happiness, should be fulfillment, right? That's what success should be, is that feeling of operating in your authentic self.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really like that, the warrior concept. It's so true. And I think that can be a common misconception of, are we going to war to fight war, or are we going to war to find peace? And I think that relates to everything that we do in health and fitness, in our careers. It's like the mentality we were talking about before. As a warrior in business, are you going to war in business to reach the fancy cars and the things like that? To me, that's going to war to make war, right? But are you going there to give opportunities to your family and to create peace at home and to, create opportunities to do things that continue to better the world? That's the two different perspectives, where it's like, now you can find peace in what you're doing. And you're actually going out to be a warrior in the fields that you are a warrior within, but you realize that the reason you're doing it is to create peace in everything that we do. I think that's really good. And one thing I wanted to touch on really quick that kind of relates to both pieces that we're talking about right now, the masculinity side and also the, somebody who's maybe in a difficult situation in life. And the framing of my book is really about taking your mind and looking at it like an instrument. So I play guitar, and the strings of the guitar are like different elements of your mindset. So what we talked about in the beginning was the reward systems, and that's necessity. So that's one of the strings. So if you have an understanding of what are those internal and external rewards, then that string is in tune. And when you go to play it, it sounds good. Your natural reflection as you're walking around the world. But as a way to maybe have a more pragmatic approach to finding solutions in your life, whether it's within your work, your health, whatever it is, and not just, we talked about, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about is really philosophical, deeper understandings, belief systems within yourself. And those are extremely important, and that's the foundation. But what my book does is walks you through how do you actually use your psychology in a way that tunes it for the things that you're trying to accomplish. So one of the strings is necessity. Another is clarity. So it's understanding, where am I going? How am I going to get there? Another string is momentum. Am I showing up on a day-to-day basis and taking enough action, putting in enough energy? Another piece is passion. So why am I doing it? What's important there? That's about digging deeper under the surface of inspiration. And the other string, there's 5 strings that I have on it, is ease, subconscious ease. Do my empowering beliefs overpower my limiting beliefs? Am I at a subconscious level, am I producing more belief or am I producing more fear? And so what it does is it says, okay, you pick one focus for the book or the audio book, and you tune your mind within it. So we walk through all those different pieces. How do we build more passion? How do we build more clarity? And by the end of it, the goal is you really have a very clear mindset around what it is you're trying to accomplish in a very pragmatic way that talks to a lot of the deep psychology of the mind. And it's come from, I've read probably 400 books on personal development and the likes, and traveled to over 30 countries to study different cultural approaches to mental health and well-being. So I've tried to kind of just pull as many of the main tenets of what has led people to be successful, but also to find fulfillment in the things that they do. And so it's kind of building this mindset that helps you to really put it into practice, because sometimes it's hard to grab at some of these big philosophical ideas. It can be very helpful, but sometimes you need all right, how do I actually work this thing on a day-to-day basis and make sure that I'm aligned in both a outcome and success perspective, but also an internal fulfillment side too. So that's one of the resources that I really built the book off of.
Yeah, it's really powerful. So where, no promo needed here, but where can someone buy this book? Genuinely curious.
Yeah. I'll show you the cover again just so you can see it if you're looking. It's on Amazon. It's on, the audio book was just finished 3 days ago and will hopefully be released in the next week or so. So depending on when you're listening to this, you might be able to find it on Audible. I'm in a few little bookstores. I'm an independent author, so I'm bootstrapping some of the marketing and stuff. But yeah, Amazon is definitely the best place to do it. Or certainly if you come to any of my events, I always bring books and stuff. And yeah, or you could reach out to me direct. You can reach me at coach@cjledy.com, and I'll send you a signed copy if you're interested too.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely will pick one up. Before we go, I just want a couple extra questions I want to throw at you. If you had one bit of advice to give to someone today, a little actionable tip they can implement today to live a slightly better life, more present, more fulfilled, what would that be?
Great question. This answer, I'm going to give it as briefly as possible because it can be a 2-hour conversation, but I'm going to boil it down into my little 1-minute synopsis here. And it goes off of the framing of what I just discussed from the book. It's called the why, the what, and the how. And it's how you take all those different pieces, the passion, clarity, momentum, ease, and necessity, and boil it down into one quick practice that you can do. And I do this before I do a workout. I do this before I sit down to work or write or anything that I'm going to do. It takes about 30 seconds. So what you want to do first is you take a few deep breaths, maybe put on some music or something, and first start with the why. So why are you doing what you're going to do? If you're sitting down to work on a podcast, why are we doing this podcast? What's important? Who are we reaching? Thinking through a couple of those pieces that connects you to the identity behind it. Then the next piece is what. So what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? What are we going to think about? What is the long term of it? What's the effect 6 months, a year, 2 years? Just seeing it kind of quickly. What am I going to do with, or even if it's in health? Okay, right now I'm doing a workout today. I want to work on thighs and back, but long term I want to be XYZ weight and health and vitality and energy and flexibility and stuff. So seeing the what. And then the third piece is the how. So how do I want to show up mentally and physically and emotionally? So if it's for the podcast, hey, I want to be engaged. I want to be excited. I want to be natural and honest, and just sort of thinking through some of those internal emotional pieces. So the why, the what, and the how. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I going to do? And how am I going to show up mentally? That's a little tool that I've really liked to use. It kind of relays off of a lot of the backbone of my book, kind of summarizes all of it into a quick little, you can do it for 20 minutes and really get deep into the pieces, or I usually just do about 30 seconds, and it kind of just refreshes you, get a little inspiration, and subconsciously it puts you into that state, reminds you, oh yeah, being excited, being vulnerable, being whatever it is that you want to be at that time. It's a little refresh, a little primer.
I love that. I will actually be trying that out right after we're done with this. So I'll let you know how it goes. My last question for you is, this wouldn't be the Don't Have Cake podcast if we didn't talk about cake at some point. Cake traditionally in our family was used to signify important events, birthdays, and I know I missed a few of those, right? So now I try and make the most out of every celebration. I would love to understand from your perspective, your background, your history, is there a favorite type of cake that you have, or some other type of like family celebration you'd love to share? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I'm cautious to name a favorite type of cake because when I was 8, I told my grandma that my favorite cake was carrot cake. And for the next probably 15 years, I was getting carrot cake, not just my grandma, but from everyone in my family. Oh, your favorite cake's carrot cake, carrot cake. And I had stopped liking carrot cake after a few years. So I got really sick of it at a certain point. So I'm a little bit cautious, but for you, I'll do it. I would say my favorite is, I really just like vanilla, man. I'm a simple vanilla guy with some, frosting on top. I really just like even just a cupcake, vanilla cupcake with some frosting, man. It's good enough for me. It's a simple answer, but if people stick to it, I won't be, I'll be able to work with that vanilla. How about yourself? I think I heard you, but I'll let you go. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, but what's your favorite again?
Yeah, for me, first of all, I love that answer, and I think there's a lot of missed opportunity in vanilla cake or even vanilla ice cream for that matter. People tend to look at it as like this boring non-answer, but to be honest with you, I think it's a good one. So kudos to you on that one. And your carrot cake story made me think about coconut, because for some reason, somehow in my family, somewhere along the lines, I honestly don't even know where this began. Actually, I do. I had an ex-girlfriend who was allergic to coconut, and the day after we broke up, I went out and I bought like some coconut Oreos or something because I haven't had coconut in 5 years, and then somehow attached to that, my entire family thought that I just loved coconut. And to this day, now 25 years later, I still get coconut flavored things. So believe me, the carrot cake thing, I get it. For me, I think the answer is chocolate peanut butter is typically my go-to cake choice. Some type of variation of that.
Yep. Yeah, I've never had chocolate peanut butter, but I'm going to have to give that a try. It sounds good. So we'll give her a go.
I look forward to sharing a piece of some type of cake or cupcake with you in the future, sir. And I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing all you shared. Any parting words?
Yeah, I just really appreciate you having me on. It's really an absolute pleasure. I would love to do it again in some form or fashion. People who are interested in getting in touch with me, like I said before, you can reach me at my email, coach@cjledy.com. I also do the Mindset is Art podcast. Got my book, Tune Your Mind. Do speaking engagements, coaching, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I would love to hear from anybody, even if it's not in any sort of work-related form. Would just love to connect with anybody who's connected to any things that we talked about. I just love chatting and exploring what everybody thinks about things. So thanks for taking some time with me.
Agree, brother. I appreciate your time and look forward to doing it again. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim.